I think you've published an empirical argument in favor of presentism. What does that go like?
So this is a co-written paper by a friend of mine, Michele and I. And within this debate between presentists and internalists, oftentimes presentists are on the defensive, especially with respect to physics, because this sort of standard thing to say is like relativity seems to go against presentism, because presentism seems to presuppose as a kind of absolute simultaneity, but relativity seems to suggest otherwise. So that's the sort of standard argument that people talk about. But it's interesting to see, are there any scientific reasons in favor of presentism? And that would be interesting. And so, we have this paper where we try to argue that there are scientific reasons in favor of presentism. And I guess the main way the paper goes is that there's a certain aspect of the laws of physics that we think are predicted if you're a presentist, that if you're a certain kind of presentist, the laws of physics have to be that way. But if you're a block universe person, it's sort of just a kind of a random coincidence that the laws are that way, and there's no real explanation for why the laws are that way. And so the certain aspect of the laws of physics that we focus on is that the laws of physics are Markovian. And that's a technical term that basically means that the present state of the universe sort of screens off anything that might have happened in the past. So that the past can only causally affect what happened in the future by way of the present. It can't sort of directly influence the future in a way that sort of skips over the present. And it's sort of easy to imagine possible worlds where there are non-Markovian laws. So in the paper, we give a sort of very toy example. So imagine the world is just a sequence of ones and zeros. That's sort of the world. Here's a sequence of ones and zeros, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0. So that's a non-Markovian world in the sense that if you take the present time just to be 1, then to know what will happen in the future, you have to look into the past. You can't just look at the present. So if you're at a 1, to know whether the next state will be 0 or 1, you have to look into the past. So it's very easy to imagine non-Markovian laws. And in the paper, we go through a lot of different ways. The sort of block universe person might try to explain why the laws have to be that way, and we conclude that there really is no reason why the laws should have to be that way. But I think if you're a presentist, there's a very natural explanation for why sort of the present screens off the past, and the past can't influence the future in a way that sort of skips over the present. And that's, the obvious idea is just that all there is the present state. There's the present state sort of exhausts all of concrete reality. And so if you have this view that, look, the only causal constraints on what will happen have to be grounded in like concretely existing stuff. So only concretely existing stuff can actually put any causal constraints on what will happen in the future. Then you sort of immediately get that, you only have to look to the present, and you don't have to look at these past truths. So we think there's a certain aspect of the laws of physics that's kind of just a kind of inexplicable coincidence. If you're a block universe person, we could very easily imagine laws that are not that way. But if you're a presentist, we think there's principled reasons for thinking the laws had to be that way. So it's a kind of empirical prediction of presentism that the laws have to be Markovian. And so if, tomorrow physicists announce the laws are not Markovian, I think that would just like refute presentism and be an argument for the block universe view. I think currently, there are certain sort of unorthodox physical theories that are not Markovian, but my understanding is that if you just look at quantum field theory, Schrodinger equation, these kinds of things, they are standardly interpreted as Markovian kinds of laws.
Is a reasonable, and correct me if I'm totally off base here, paraphrase of the gist of this argument that reality corresponds to causal efficacy or something like that, and if the past has and can causally influence the future without touching the present, then we ought to claim it's real?
Yeah, something like that. So this gets into what do you think about the laws of nature and the nature of causation stuff. But I think a very natural kind of view to have is that causal constraints in the future have to be grounded in concretely existing stuff. And that on its own doesn't say anything if you're a block universe person, because everything concretely exists. But if you're a presentist, it puts a lot of constraints on how the future might go.
I think I had a somewhat, well, for me, it was a frustrating conversation with Tim about this, mainly because I lack the knowledge of physics to really be persuasive or get my point across when I'm talking with him. But I think it came down to Markovian laws. I was asking about whether or not time travel to the future is possible, in which you, would bypass the person at a certain point, and he was insisting that time travel to the future is possible. You just cryogenically freeze yourself and then go through the present. But I'm wondering if you can bypass.
I think that's actually another. So before, when you talked about interesting debates about time, obviously another debate is time travel, and there's actually a lot of interesting stuff about the relationship between time travel and this kind of A theory, B theory kind of thing. So some people argue that there's specific reasons internal to like the A theory of time why time travel doesn't really make sense. But maybe it makes more sense on a kind of B theoretic picture. But anyway, but about the time travel to the future, I guess is the question whether it's possible or so there's a question whether like the laws of physics allow it and stuff, and there's a sort of question about it whether it's compatible with like the nature of time and stuff. I think time travel is kind of a weird thing because there's a lot of things that seem like time travel, but you have to distinguish, and it's actually hard to distinguish that. So here's a story. I like go into a time machine, press a button, and then I die. The time machine blows up or disappears. And then later, just like by a stroke of luck, a machine pops into existence with like a clone of me. And the clone of me says like, I was David Builes, I've time traveled, etc. But you might think that's not really time travel. That's just like someone died and then someone popped into existence by a freak accident and had the same memories and personality. So, and actually like that sort of looks the same on the outside. But we don't want to say that's time travel. And so genuine time travel, it seems like, requires a kind of notion of identity, like the person who stepped out is the very same person who stepped in, and a sort of causal connection that like it was because I pressed this button that caused this thing. And I think both can be resisted. So I think it certainly seems possible that I just like, I don't know, pop out of existence and some other thing pops into existence. But the sort of identity thing and the causal thing, I think, are much more suspect.
This is more of a meta question or comment, but in one of my conversations with Dan Dennett, he mentioned that he really hates these swamp man sort of thought experiments where people just pop into existence out of nowhere, because if I recall correctly, they're just not so useful as intuition pumps because they're so far from our intuitions. We really don't know what to think about them, but they are very fun.
Yeah, I think they're really fun, and I think they're very, I think it depends on your purpose, whether they're useful. So you might just want to kind of, there might be certain theoretical purposes for which it's irrelevant to think about swamp. But I think, metaphysicians often want to have like very general theories about like what's possible and et cetera, and they want to cover like all the cases. So I think for metaphysicians, I think it's very natural to consider these very weird kinds of cases. And I think often a lot of the most interesting metaphysics comes from considering very weird kinds of cases. So yeah, I guess it depends on your theoretical purposes, but I find myself thinking about the kind of stuff a lot.